But first I have on my list who is here is Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, who is also a fellow Jersey gal. And she's going to tell us about how she rustles up the Colorado inland folks to think about the ocean. Of course, Boulder, Colorado also has what, the highest per capita number of divers?
Yep, number one out of all the inland states.
Yes. Yeah.
Sadly, California rivals us.
So, I figured, what better organization than the Colorado Ocean Coalition, now also into the Inland Ocean Coalition, to really showcase how ocean thinking is moving upstream. Because a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, DC chapter Surfrider Foundation, my friend Julie Lawson there, came up with the phrase, saving the ocean is an upstream battle. And it very much is. When you look at how we use and abuse our land, from runoff to driving cars and being wasteful of energy. I don't know if any of you saw that Chasing Coral movie. How many people saw that? If you haven't seen it, yeah, it was you really need like a whole stack of tissues before you see that. And I really do suggest that you see it, because it really does bring home the gravity of the dire straits that the ocean is right now in. So anyway, of course, with this panel, we are looking at how we're conveying that ocean message and conveying that love of the ocean to the people in the heartland, in those hard-to-reach places upstream. And Vicki's organization does a wonderful job doing that. So she's kind of got the grassroots folks. And Michael Bowman here is with, and I'm going to totally mess up, the National Hemp Association. Now, I have to tell you, I was looking, this is funny, I was paddling in the rivers of South Jersey, and I ran into a kayaker who is all about, he's a political type dude. He's all about legalization of pot, but he also knows a lot about hemp, which is not pot, so you don't get the two confused. But hemp, not only can it be a high quality food for fish, but it could also replace those omega-3s that we all look for when we eat the omega, the oils from the fish in the sea that we're depleting rapidly. So it's got that potential, plus it's clothing, plus it's building material. I mean, it is like, plus it doesn't, bioplastics. And I have this out just a straight tiny bit with the plastic issue. How many of you have seen that movie, It's a Wonderful Life? Okay, there was a part where that one friend of the George character was talking about investing in plastics made from soybeans. Do you remember that part in that movie? It's possible. They were thinking about it back then. What happened? Big petroleum. But anyway, so I'm going to keep moving on that. Oh, also, we do have a champion of change right here in Michael Bowman. He was awarded that prestigious prize by President Obama. So Mike kind of represents how industry can help with the ocean movement, get the ball rolling, so that when people are looking at hemp, like, why hemp? Well, hemp is not as impactful as cotton, and it's a food, and it helps the ocean. So it's another way to tie it all in. And then through grassroots industry, if Fred were here, he would be another grassroots guy. But then we have Anna, who pulls it, Anna Aurilio. Am I saying your last name correctly?
Yep.
Who pulls it all together. She is with Environment America, and she is the policy person, and so she pulls it all together. In order to push policy, it always is helpful when you have a bunch of grassroots folks on the ground who realize, like, oh my goodness, this is so wrong, we need to fix this, and now we need a policy for it so we never go back. So we have really, I think, the gamut here. And I'm going to let these guys do that. And Fred's not here, so you can go a little bit longer if you want. 5-10 minutes telling us, everyone, what it is exactly you all do and how you are working your ocean message into your movement. And I'm going to start off with Vicki first.
Why, thank you. So, land to sea stewardship, ridge to reef, it all flows downstream from the ocean. But what does that really mean? And how do we take those concepts and then really connect it with people to allow citizens and communities to really engage and actually take the next step so we have some kind of action, especially when you might be 500 to 1,000 miles from the ocean and you can't even see it. So that's a big challenge. And we've been talking a lot about how do you get people involved? And most of the people traditionally involved are those that live along the coast and they can actually see it. So what we've been trying to do is move into a whole different zone of life. And the nice thing is more and more people are recognizing how much the ocean depends, or how much we depend on the ocean. And you guys know all of this stuff, but these are the kind of things that I like to share with our inland community. That more than half of the air that we breathe comes from oxygen-producing plants. Oceans regulate our climate. A majority of our fresh water comes from the ocean, just from that hydrological cycle, and you probably remember that from your middle school grades. And a good portion of the food that we eat. And if you are from Colorado or from any of the headwater regions, you know where the ocean starts. And it does not necessarily start at the coastline. So like, what does that mean? So we live in an area where we have a phenomenal network of rivers. And as these rivers go through the largest watershed in the country, where most of us live, the Mississippi-Missouri drainage, it goes through and it picks up all kinds of pollutants. Everything from ag runoff to livestock, stock, the chemicals that come from that, the waste, it all in essence goes off that landscape and then flows into the ocean. And then we have our urban centers, and we have all kinds of things that are happening in our backyards. Our chemicals, our fertilizers, we've got our animal waste, we've got oil from cars, and sadly, if you don't maintain your car, you can lose up to about a gallon of oil a day. So just think about the hundreds of thousands of cars that are all throughout that big watershed in the middle of the country. And when it rains, it just takes all of that stuff into the storm drain, and it moves it to the closest body of water. And this also includes the ever-increasing tide of plastics that we have. And these are photographs taken right outside of our backyard in our reservoir and in our creeks. And we know that 80% of all the pollutants that we find in the ocean come from inland sources. And the thing with plastics, it never ever goes away. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and it stays in our ecosystem. And then we've got that great thing called microbeads, and we use them in our kitchens and in our bathrooms. And when we use them, whether we're brushing or scrubbing, it goes right down the drain, and our wastewater treatment facilities do not have the capacity to filter out those tiny microbeads. And up to 4.5 million particles of microbead plastics are let loose in our river systems from every single plant every single day that is coursing down through our middle of our country. And you'll hear about this later this afternoon if you go to the coral reef panel. But oxybenzone is becoming more and more talked about. And we know the impacts of oxybenzone on coral reefs, but we're also finding out that it is also an endocrine disruptor, and its ability to change both amphibians and fish to feminize them. So we're having problems with that. So if you go swimming in the reservoir or tubing, it washes off. However, it's even a little bit more scary, because when you put it on your body, shortly after that your body absorbs it and then you urinate it out. That too goes through our wastewater treatment facilities into our rivers and continues its journey downstream to the ocean. So by the time all of these rivers converge and they hit the Mississippi and they go out into the Gulf of Mexico, we have quite a story. So our actions on land really does tell a story in the sea. So when it hits that zone, it creates the largest dead zone that we have in the United States. And on average, it's about 5,000 square miles, the size of Connecticut, but it can also go to 6,000, depending on what the season is. So the big story is, hey, if you don't think you've got a connection in the middle of the country, follow the water, because we certainly do. Well, in addition to the water, there are so many other things to think about, and literally, no matter where you live. Think about the food that we eat. Are we eating sustainably? Are we contributing to mass overfishing? Our energy choices. Burning fossil fuel, about a third of it goes back into the ocean, creating ocean acidification. So literally, no matter where we live, we are impacting the ocean. And what we've been doing is really trying to get that message across to the inland communities. So in 2011, I formed the Colorado Ocean Coalition, and I'm a partner with the Ocean Foundation, one of their projects. And that whole idea was to create and inspire an inland community to be stewards of our oceans. And you can see here, we've been going to the Blue Vision Summit because that photo was here a couple of years ago. Well, the neat thing is that over the last couple of years, other communities have been saying, well, wait a minute, we want to get involved too. We want to start encouraging our communities. And so our model is fantastic. Play with us. The more people involved, especially away from the coast, the more action and energy we could really use to get this message out. So other groups have actually formed chapters, and so in 2015 they started growing, and then just recently this year we've transitioned from the Colorado Ocean Coalition to the Inland Coalition. And what we're doing is creating the energy that we've been able to generate as COCO, Colorado Ocean Coalition, and the programs that we've created like the Ocean Rangers. We are now sharing them with other chapters so they don't have to start from scratch. And we can share these concepts and websites. And so we're sharing our programs, we're sharing our educational experiences, and we really are trying to increase our community partnerships because, as you know, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration is the way to go. So we have now formed agreements with NOAA to be their inland ocean partner. Obviously, we're connected in with Healthy Oceans and with the Blue Frontier Summit and the campaign and many, many other ones. So without that community partnership, we really wouldn't be able to have this unified message of how do you protect oceans inland and from a mile high. So we also do a lot of work around key legislative efforts. So we come here to the summit, we go to Hill Day, and then when we're back in our home areas, we go and we visit our congressional leaders and really try to get that message out. Like, we care about the ocean. You have constituents. You really need to listen to the constituents and therefore work towards ocean preservation, coral reef protection, etc. And then we're also working with our local watersheds, the Waterkeeper Alliance. We just adopted the Boulder Creek to be a Boulder Creek Waterkeeper program. So to kind of sum it up, we have 3 goals, and you can see that now our Inland Ocean Coalition has 7 chapters to date. So the real sense is unite these inland communities to educate and enhance knowledge. Let's educate people, because before you can get them to act, they really have to understand what the situation is and how they are empowered. We have got a lot of new audiences that we can break into. Nebraska is one of our goals, but really try to help other people to understand the connection between ocean and water, and then facilitate community building. And one of the key tenets of the Inland Ocean Coalition is celebrate. So we have blue drinks every month, we have parties, we have cleanups, and the whole idea is, yes, it can be daunting to have all of the issues that we're talking about and learning about this week, but we can still do a lot of work to get together to celebrate and really make a positive difference. So the whole idea of the Inland Ocean Coalition really is to build an inland ocean movement to support each other and really try to inspire people who have not yet been brought into the discussion. Bring them in and let's make a big difference both on the political scale and on a local level. So, thank you so much.
Mike Bowman with the the National Hemp Association, just reminding everyone what organization he said.
Well, thank you, Margo. I'm an unlikely participant today. I grew up on a farm and ranch in a very remote part of eastern Colorado. But I'll tell you, that'll be part of the journey now. But I'll start with it. Great to be here at George Washington University. George Washington was one of the founding fathers who grew hemp in this country. He and Thomas Jefferson. And hemp was a very key component to our early nation. Our printing presses were fueled by hemp paper, and if you had more than 10 acres in the colonial days, you were required to take 10% of your land and devote it to hemp for fiber and paper and the things that we needed. It created the sails that brought the early settlers to our country, and then those settlers who got on the Conestoga wagons and came west. So it's a very important crop, traced back 12,000 years to the Chinese, and there's hemp fiber found in the pyramids in Egypt, and we could go on and on and on about the role of hemp in the evolution of man and agriculture. It's played a very important part for us historically. I didn't get into the ocean debate really on purpose. And like much of the things in my life, it's always by accident. If you're doing the right thing or you think you're doing the right thing, you end up in the right places. But I had an opportunity in 1999 as I was doing a lot of work on soils in Africa with Alan Savory to come across an Australian couple in camp one night who had just come from India, and they were telling me about how the collapse of a lot of the rural India communities where they were being forced to go to GMO cotton from what had historically been a hemp economy, and what that was doing. There's been documentaries about the suicides, which number over 250,000 now of Indian farmers who have lost really their way of life and being forced into that system. So for me, I grew up in a very social justice kind of mindset, and so I just thought it was how wrong that was, what was going on. I was kind of anti-Monsanto and anti where agriculture was going at that time anyway. So I got interested in it from the social justice perspective, and it wasn't until I realized that, well, if I go back to agriculture in the Great Plains where I'm from, hemp was never grown that far west back in up to the 30s and 40s through the Hemp for Victory campaign, and so I knew little about the plant. So it was my interest in the social justice issue around Indian farmers that brought me into the education component of what hemp can do, and then understanding the whole process of how this unfolded in our country and how it became illegal and why it needed to come back. Now, the interesting connection from an ocean perspective for me is that over the in the Great Plains, we lived over a great ocean. It just happened to be about 200 feet below us, over the overburden of Earth, terra firma, called the Ogallala Aquifer. And my family and as many families from North Dakota to Texas have been busy sticking straws in that aquifer since the late 50s, early 60s, and really destroying that aquifer, all based on public policy. You know, it is our farm bill that was essentially driving that overconsumption and that demand, and really for American farmers, not a lot unlike the Indian farmers who were being forced into a system that was a government construct and kept them in that system perpetually, even today. And so I got very interested in all of the connects. My work with Alan in land use early kind of led me to systems thinking anyway. So the systems that I was dealing with were just upside down from the systems that particularly people in the oceans world would live in. So I had an opportunity to hear Philippe Cousteau speak once in the early days when I was working on some renewable energy issues about a decade ago, and so out of the blue I emailed him and asked him if he'd have lunch with me someday, because I wanted to talk about how an uncommon partnership between somebody like me, so landlocked, and somebody like him who lived in the water really were together. And by that time I had educated myself a lot on hemp and what we could do and giving farmers choices to move away from corn and soybeans and so many of the practices that were destroying the water indirectly into the oceans. So we had a very pleasant lunch. The conversation didn't go anywhere, although I think he was interested, but like so many of us that are activists, we have a lot on our plate. But I never forgot about that conversation and the belief that really inland farmers, dryland farmers in the Great Plains were connected to the ocean as well. About 3 years later then, I had a chance to speak with a member of the House Natural Resources Committee back when the Democrats controlled the House, and Anna Cohen, and she was discussing the issue of the fisheries collapse, and we were talking about solutions. How do we find solutions to fix this? And I had, just prior to that had come across the data that showed that the hemp oil from the cold press of the head seed of the male plant on industrial hemp had an almost identical profile to fish oil in the omegas. And that the co-product of that, really hemp protein, was an almost perfect fish food So our conversation at that time, and then keep in mind this is pre any legalization in the United States, so it wasn't really considered a solution, but it was a solution. That we had a land-based solution to some of these ocean challenges. We could create fish oil on land. We would have a protein source that was natural and regenerative in nature by the nature of the way the plant grows to provide that kind of feed source to aquaculture on board and keep the people in the industry employed. So we were able to keep that conversation going. At that time, I was also working then quietly with just one other person in Colorado to change law, realizing we had a big uphill battle to climb. We had industrial hemp sits on the Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, thanks to Richard Nixon. So it's treated on par with heroin and cocaine, even though it's a plant that really represents abundance and regeneration and all the good things, everything we need today. It's parked on Schedule 1, and so that after decades of myths and this bureaucratic ingraining of this myth onto what this part of the cannabis sativa plant was in this range, the sober cousin to marijuana, realizing this was a big pull. It was a pull that we wouldn't get done at the federal level first. So we decided to try to tackle Colorado, and became part of the coalition that legalized the entirety of the cannabis sativa plant in 2012. Colorado was the first state to end prohibition of industrial hemp as well as adult use for that. And since that time, then we have gone out on a both state-based and the federal campaign. We have legalized industrial hemp in 33 states now. We have a federal bill called the Industrial Hemp Farming Act to deschedule hemp. I wrote the Amendment 7606 to the Farm Bill in 2014 that effectively legalized industrial hemp in any state where it was legal. We've had strong support from Congress. This has been a real left-right alliance. This issue is not a contentious one in Capitol Hill. It just magnifies how dysfunctional our Congress is, and we can't even tackle issues that have broad bipartisan support. But thanks to some very key members, both from the left and right, we've been able to get the Farm Bill passed. We've been able to get riders on the Omnibus Act that allow then the transportation of those products across the nation, and strong support for the Industrial Hemp Farming Act that I think where there's some cautious optimism that we'll see passed over the next couple of years. So we're really looking forward to being able to finally have a solution and that we can incorporate even more fully into the next Farm Bill. The good news is that it isn't often that agriculture has a good story to bring to the masses. Usually we're talking about animal runoff or nutrient loads or chemical applications, or there's a sundry things we could talk about there. Here we have a story where we can really connect and we can talk about solutions, and we really need to fully bring that into its full bloom into the next Farm Bill. The unfortunate part of a Farm Bill today, and it needs it because we need a very broad coalition on this from youth and urban, because the Farm Bill is effectively written by agribusiness, and we now have sitting before us in this administration the merger of Monsanto and Bayer and DuPont and Dow. We now have chemical companies that are effectively masquerading themselves as food companies to go out and trot around the globe and sell their product to farmers here and abroad. So it is a tough pull. They have a lot of money, but as I think it was Ralph Nader that said this morning, or on the capital side, we have human capital. I'm sorry, it was Senator Mendez that said that. We have human capital. So we're I do believe there's a great awakening. The movie last night was just yet another one for me to really grasp both the challenges and I think the opportunities. We do live in a great time, and we do know what we need to fix the problems. These aren't technological problems or deployment problems. These are political problems, and pure and simple. And we could fix everything with what we know today. So as I was looking at the 6 breakout sessions this morning, I saw that I always my standard reply to everyone is tell me what your problem is, and somewhere in that solution set, the hemp plant can probably play a role in it. And I was looking through those 6 breakouts. I'm like, I'd like to sit there because I could talk about this and that. And so whether it's about microbeads and fiber and what we're going to do to change our fiber supply chain, or whether it's our food and moving away from soy protein to hemp protein, and name it, foundations where hempcrete, where we can sequester great amounts of CO2, whether it's biochar in soils and foundations. We just have great opportunities ahead of us, but it all is embedded in public policy until we get, if we don't get public policy right in these days, we can't get anything right, because it's so, these industries are so controlled by the behemoths.
So it sounds like you would do well to link up with a group, say like Vicki's group, and even Environment America, so that it could help, expand on your outreach, because, as we know, so much policy comes about when there's a public outcry, from, women's right to vote and to civil rights, which of course we see how much work we still have to do, and Clean Water Act. I mean, we don't have, so we need that public. And just one question before I move on to Anna over there. But how, I might have missed the drought tolerance aspect of hemp?
It is, and that is watching the overfishing of the Ogallala with water, is that hemp uses substantially less water than corn or alfalfa or many of the other crops we're doing. So I was looking at through that lens of resource conservation.
Yeah.
So it does have a great
Because that would be huge. I mean, right now I was just reading in Alabama, and their big discussion there is allowing for farmers to take more water out of their rivers. Now that's going to be very interesting for the shipping industry on the 10-ton, because they do have some goods. Now granted, the 10-ton is not used as much as they thought it would be. That's a governmental boondoggle, which if any of you know about that, it's kind of the alternate route to the Mississippi. But this kind of thing, it is so anyway, not to keep me babbling on here, to go on to Anna so she can tie it all into policy and etc. Anna Aurilio, who's the director of the Washington, D.C. office of Environment in America, and she focuses on policy development, research, and advocacy on energy issues. Oh yeah, we didn't even actually touch on the alternative energy. I mean, hemp is it's like,
Henry Ford in 1937, we had a he was ready to move us to a bioeconomy. We were at a fork in the road in 1937, and then the war happened.
I just stabbed in.
Great, thanks. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me. I run the DC office for Environment America, and we're a federation of 29 state-based citizen-funded organizations, including in Colorado and New Jersey, which is awesome. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to be an advocate for my whole life so far, and then talk about the basics of getting policy wins. How do we actually figure out how we're going to solve problems and win with a lens of clean water and oceans. A little bit about me. I grew up in New England. So when I was really young, we would drive to Revere Beach and Hot Beach, which were very less than pristine back in the 1960s for anyone who lived in New England, because we had a failed sewage treatment plant that was just basically spewing raw sewage into the Boston Harbor. And we kept having to drive further and further north, because my dad was a civil engineer and would look at the water and say, no, we can't go in the water here, we gotta go north. So that was one little lesson. And then when I went to high school, I moved to Woburn, Massachusetts, which some people may have heard of. When we were there, families were getting their kids treated for leukemia. And they looked in the hospital waiting room, and they realized that they were neighbors. And they canvassed the neighborhood and ultimately discovered that our town's drinking water well was highly contaminated with solvents, and figured out that W.R. Grace and Beatrice Foods and Universe Chemical had been telling their employees to dump the waste out back, and out back on the other side of the chain link fence was our drinking water well. So this was horrifying. It was one of the first times when people organized to fight back illness caused by chemical contamination. And it became a book and a movie starring John Travolta, but unfortunately, as you know, if you've seen it, some of the kids didn't make it. And we were lucky, we stopped drinking the water right away. But it was kind of horrifying that the stuff that comes out of your tap isn't really clean. And ultimately, I went back to school and I went to MIT and I got a degree in environmental engineering, and we studied our whole watershed, and I looked at the history of industrialization in that part of New England, tanneries and chemical companies for 150 years, and you could trace the contamination all the way down into the Boston Harbor. So the other lesson learned is, number one, the laws on the books weren't getting enforced. People were making stupid decisions with toxic chemicals in kids' health. And three is that once you spew the pollution out, it's almost impossible to get it back in. So it's much, much better to prevent it in the first place, and that's what Michael's talking about, with changing some of the crops and the way that we generate our goods. So all of that led me down to DC in 1993 to figure out that none of this stuff was rocket science, and what is going on, that the people that we're electing to represent us aren't solving these problems, which again, it's not rocket science. Henry Ford was talking about this stuff in the 1930s. President Johnson commissioned a scientific panel that came to the conclusion in the 1960s that CO2 is a dangerous air pollutant and we ought to deal with it. So again, none of this stuff is, and you all know, all politics is local and the water flows downstream. So that's a little bit about me. So now getting into, okay, we are confronted with still significant problems, right? We've come a long way in that you can now swim in the beaches north of Boston. We got a better sewage treatment plant-ish. People aren't dropping dead in the streets from air pollution like they did in New York City in the 1960s, but Environment America just looked at air pollution in 2015, and more than 72 cities had more than 100 days of unhealthy air in 2015. That's 1 in 4 days the air is unhealthy. So that seems wrong. Global warming, and then water, which seems the most fundamental of all, right? You can't live without water. And so what are we going to do? So I have 3 lessons that I've learned over the years that I've been in DC working on all these issues. One is all politics is local. 2 is you totally need to know who your target is, who the decider is. And then 3 is organizing people to push back and to fight for what's right and what we all need and deserve is an extremely effective, however, backbreaking way to win the fight, but that's what we've been doing the whole time, and I've seen it work. So all politics is local. Susan Collins of Maine is a Republican, and she is right now the only Republican senator that we mostly can count on to vote against attacks on our environmental laws, and in particular on offshore drilling, right? We have some hope for some of the Floridians, but Marco Rubio's being wicked squishy. But in the Senate, she's our one somewhat solid Republican. And the reason for that is that Maine depends on the coast and the ocean for its livelihood, right? Lobster fishermen in Maine are beloved and iconic. And she also knows that Maine is often seen as the tailpipe of the country, so that the prevailing winds blow a lot of the Midwest pollution over into Maine. So during the acid rain problems in the 80s and 90s, Maine was called the tailpipe of the nation. And so Susan Collins knows that no matter what her party leadership says to her, she has to go back home and look at the lobstermen in the eye. And if she's not doing what's right for the coast, she's going to hear it and they're not going to vote for her. So that's one very, very important lesson. Don't worry about party affiliation. I mean, of course, yes, the best predictor of people's future behavior is how they voted in the past. So you have to take that into account. But look at what's going to move them. What do they care about locally? Who are the people? And we work very closely with the Clean Water Network, which is an association of nearly 200 local watershed groups. And that's what they do. They work on local water issues. And as Rona can tell you, the local watershed groups helped get the Chesapeake Bay cleanup plan in place, because they would, just go out and tell the story about their local river or stream and some of the big rivers as well, and be relentless and talk to the decision makers. So they had to be on their side. Again, no matter who they were hearing from, if they wanted to go back and listen to their constituents, they were going to have to do the right thing there. You have to make it untenable for them, right? So then, if all politics is local, what do you have to do to actually move the target? So, anyone here from Pennsylvania? Okay. Well, sorry. Senator Bob Casey is a Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, and he is a good-hearted man. He cares about kids' health. But for a while, when he was first elected to Congress, he was not really that forceful and standing-uppy, championing on environmental issues. And part of it was that Pennsylvania has a coal industry, they have utilities, they're pretty industrial, they also have a lot of agriculture, especially corporate agriculture. And so when it came time for us to support the Clean Water Rule to restore protections to drinking water for 1 in 3 Americans, Senator Casey was kind of nowhere to be found. And we had to figure out, how are we going to get this guy to stand up? I mean, Penn Environment, which is our local affiliate, we've got a lot of members there. We know people care about this issue. So what we decided is we were going to create like a wall of public acceptance for clean water. And it didn't matter if you were a brewery or a trout fisherman or a nurse or a watershed group or an environmentalist. You were going to line up, and we did events with that whole range of people, just showing how popular clean water was and how important it was. And we finally got him to see that it was perfectly fine and acceptable to stand up for clean water, because we knew that's what he needed to see. And then finally, getting people together to organize them, right? That's our basic strategy. I'm sure you heard Ralph Nader say this, but when it comes to big money in politics, the only thing that's going to be able to overcome the rustle of the campaign contributions besides a constitutional amendment is organizing people and getting them to push back. And so on clean water, we got hundreds of thousands of comments into the Clean Water Rule. When it came to President Obama disappointingly suggesting that we open up the southeast coast of the United States to new offshore drilling, and even the Democratic governors were for it, right? The Virginia governor was for it, and senators were for it. So we, along with maybe many of you in the room, organized local businesses. And we said, you know, it doesn't matter that the governor of Virginia thinks this is good for the economy, or North Carolina, most of the politicians, except for Walter Jones, is supporting it. We're going to get the bars and the restaurants and the people who rent the surfboards, we're going to get all of those people to weigh in. And some of you may have helped with that effort. Thousands of people and small businesses all up and down the coast weighed in to ultimately persuade the president that he couldn't propose new drilling off the coast, even though the local politicians of his own party were for us. So that is a huge example, and the thing that gives me hope, even in the face of the sort of zombie apocalypse that's heading towards us now right here in this city. But all of these people live somewhere. All of these people have to look their neighbors in the face, and if we're smart and we figure out what it is they care about, we get the groups that care about places and waterways to join up with the people that live along the coast, I think we can make a lot of headway, and most importantly, defend the progress that we've made. So I ran into an old friend of mine in the hallway, Mike Ravitz, who's now working with the Global Refuge System. And, you know, I was like, oh, God, this is a hard, hard day today, because we thought that Trump was going to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But it turns out that his daughter and the former CEO of Exxon, Rex Tillerson, are against that. And so maybe I'm so planning. That's why. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And he said, well, listen, ever since 2008, when we lost the moratorium on offshore drilling, it turns out there hasn't been a net increase in offshore drilling. So we have held these huge oil companies at bay for that long. There's no oil rigs in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge anyway. So this is my little turnaround of hope to end with.
So I go to school in Florida, and like you said, we were having a lot of problems with Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
And like within smaller governmental levels, you can't even mention climate change.
Right.
So what would be the best way to contact? Because we signed petitions and like boycott Marco Rubio to get him to come to town hall meetings, and he just won't do it.
Yeah.
So like, what would be the best way to do something like this in the state of Florida?
Yeah, it depends on who your target is and what you're trying to accomplish, right? So Florida actually is the only state that has a legislative moratorium on offshore drilling, and that got created, I think, in 2005. When the entire Florida congressional delegation actually got together and said, oh, if we lose the moratorium, Florida's not going to be protected. So it's the only one that's protected legislatively. And the reason for that is decades of organizing the local businesses. So if you wanted to focus on offshore drilling, what I would do is I would get the hotels and the restaurants and all the coastal businesses way involved and just start pummeling him. Because at some point, that thing is going to go away, and he needs to stand up and defend the rest of the coast. So that would be one idea. The second idea is on climate change, you have two ways to go, right? One is you can try to persuade people who don't really, have skeptical beliefs about the science and how much we need to worry about this problem. You could try to say, no, look, it's happening all around us. In Florida, you actually have a new word, sunny day flooding, that is, I call it global warming language now, right? Because you're flooding when it's sunny days because of sea level rise. So you could try that tack, or you could try the other angle, which is, forget about global warming and climate change. Florida is the sunshine state. We should put solar panels on our roofs, and let's just go gangbusters. And there's a whole effort in Florida now to do more on solar. So those are the ways to do it. When it comes to Marco Rubio, like, he's hearing the people already, because he introduced a bill that's half good and half bad, right? Half of it protects the legislative moratorium, but the other half now holds out a bribe for places that do have offshore drilling and does revenue sharing, so it bribes local communities to accept offshore drilling. So he's kind of betwixt and between, and I do feel like if you got more coastal businesses and maybe students and young people, because at some point he's going to need to appear on the ballot again, he might have to listen a little bit more closely. So those are my three ideas. Yeah.
Is this open for any hands?
Oh, sure.
So my name is Fred Roy. I'm a professional engineer in the state of North Carolina. Another zombie apocalypse situation going on there. But there is hope, and one of them is related to hemp. Michael probably realizes the state actually passed at midnight last year a bill that allows for a North Carolina Industrial Hemp Commission to be put together, created, as long as there's funding. Of course, the General Assembly didn't provide any funding, so they figured it would never happen. Well, farmers from all over the state got together who really want to do this. They wrote a check to our agriculture secretary. Bam, they got a commission. It's off and running.
They're great. They really are off.
What state is this?
North Carolina.
Carolina.
The seed is on the way.
Yeah.
They ran into the DEA problem of
Yeah.
interstate seed transfer, which is crazy. But
Don't try to explain federal drug policy.
yeah, right.
Some of those
Yeah.
But I've been attending the meetings, and I'm a town engineer. I do water, sewer, stormwater, green infrastructure, and all that stuff. And I'm also an oceanographer from a past life. So this whole thing here is like making my head explode. It actually works. And so that's kind of my goal.
Like the pyramids are, we're a good enough example.
But that's my goal. So thank you all for being here. But my love is the ocean, which is kind of crazy. I want to move back to the beach and just get involved in saving ocean advocacy work. But anyway, this is all very interesting. And my fiancée is here, Linda Booker, who has got the straws filmed. You each got a straw in your bag with a card. That's her film. So check it out. Anyway, so
We can make straws from hemp paper.
it's all very good conversation.
Hi, my name is Rona Cobell. I'm a reporter with the Chesapeake Bay Journal. We cover 6 days in DC, and I'll be on the lunch panel with the media folks. And in my freelance life, I do other work, and I just wrote a report about hemp for the Able Foundation called Hope for Hemp. You can find it on the Able Foundation's website. And Michael's organization has tons of good information on Hemp Industries Association. So I guess I'm wondering, having been immersed in the hemp world from Christmas until March, and I knew nothing about it when I started, and found, like most people do who get into hemp, why isn't this everywhere? Why aren't we doing this? Why in the world is this illegal? I'm wondering, the message about hemp being better, like in the Ogallala water aquifer, and being better for the environment, and being a better solution to the corn, wheat, soybean, pollution cycle that we've got going in a lot of farms and the animal agriculture. I wrote about that, but I haven't heard much about it elsewhere, and I'm wondering if this is a message that you feel is going to resonate as we talk more about, like, the climate change and the increasing greenhouse gas and making products like plastics and fiber and all this. If there's going to be more of an alliance between hemp and sort of the traditional environmental movement. Like,
I hope so. I mean, and I do think that is going to happen. We're relatively new industry. I mean, there was only 16,000 acres grown last year in all of the United States, and half of those were in Colorado. So it's slow, but I think it can move quickly. And I think what's going to drive this industry is going to be consumer demand. When you start showing up and you start asking your grocer, where's my food? I think hemp is the new soybean, frankly. When you look at the consumer, I think consumers generally know that they're not buying the BS about Roundup not being a carcinogen. They're not buying the BS about all this, how we can only feed the world by buying Monsanto and Bayer and Dow and DuPont products. We know those are fundamentally untrue statements. But we've got to get out and make that. And I think the consumers demanding these products, whether it's something you wear, whether it's something you eat, is going to help shift that. And I think we can shift it quickly and dramatically. The rest of the world has been growing this for a long time. It's only this bastion of the United States here where we've kept it like this. And I think that so the farmers ultimately would go to where the market is. And we've got a lot of cleanup to do, like in North Carolina, there's about 890,000 acres of tobacco land that has some actual soil quality problems. So as these farmers want to move to organics and want to move to different things, the phytoremediation opportunities with the hemp plant to clean up those soils, or in the Chesapeake Bay, where you've got the nutrient load from the chicken farms. And, I mean, they're using hemp at Fukushima to remediate the soils, and they've been using it in Chernobyl for, 30 years. So it's a plant that can, and we can regenerate the soils, we can create a better product, and we can create an abundance of product. And I think that it really is a matter of education and getting that out, because if you give me 5 minutes with anybody, the most ardent skeptic of this, I'll have a supporter, because, and part of it is just because when you talk about the drug laws and how we treat, I mean, the absurdity of our laws and how this is stuck in a channel and ultimately a failed drug war that we've wasted $1 trillion on,
Right,
and we have a solution here. So,
hemp is now considered more dangerous than opioids.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
just.
It's
Yeah, thanks to our
scheduled,
new
we're Schedule
attorney
1, hemp is Schedule 1, and opioids
It's all
are
right, Schedule 2.
the next schedule down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's a tie.
Yeah.
Janice?
I was just going to ask Michael if you would, maybe this is a good time to talk about the hemp campaign, because education is really the key. Once people get it, they really get it. They have no idea. It
Yeah.
was such a big part of the world economy throughout history.
Well, thanks for that question.
And the anniversary of,
So
it's the 75th anniversary, well, you'll tell them, go ahead.
Well, we're on this is the 75th anniversary of the Hemp for Victory campaign. In 1942 and 43, our government saw hemp as such an important component of winning World War II that they ended prohibition. In 1942, the USDA and the University of Kentucky teamed up and gave every 4-H club in Kentucky enough seed to plant 2 acres for seed multiplication. And in 1943, those seeds were used then across the 7th state area to grow the hemp for the canvas, for the parachutes, and the uniforms for the military and such. So we had 4-H kids growing what today our government call a dangerous drug to win the war. And so Janice and I and a small group are working on how do we take that campaign, because that Rosie the Riveter from that area, that can-do spirit, the women in particular who really help that. Harriet for Hemp, there we go.
She's a farmer.
How we can move that. We have a war going on now. It's not a physical war like World War II was. It's a war on our oceans. It's a war on our health. It's a war on our air. It's a war on our water. And so we can use that. I think use that story, which is a real eye opener for everybody. They did what? And our government, for many, many years, denied that campaign ever existed. They thought they destroyed all the evidence that campaign ever existed. There just happened to be a film, one copy that was left in safekeeping in an island off of the mainland that resurfaced. So they had to come clean and say,
What was
"Oh
the
yeah,
name
we
of
did
that
it."
film?
Hemp for Victory.
Okay. And then,
So yeah.
I'm Faith Taylor from the University of Tampa, and there I'm a part of the Environmental Protection Coalition, and for the initiatives that we support, they have to be completely ethical. So could you just talk a little bit more about the environmental impacts of?
Well, hemp will absorb 4 times more CO2 per acre than a forest in a year. So and that's what gives it the long chain carbons that makes it the natural, a very strong natural fiber and a strong stock as well. So there's the ethics of using less fertilizer, less water.
How does it use less fertilizer?
It's a plant that doesn't require the level of nutrients that a corn or particularly a corn plant would need just by its nature.
Corn and chicken poo are
Chicken poo,
destroying the Chesapeake.
Yeah.
So we can go in and use a much lighter nutrient load. Generally no need for pesticides and no need for herbicides. It grows fast, shades the soil, and so this reduction in the load of chemicals and nutrients, just in general in the system, goes dramatically down with that plant. Now the ethical part is an interesting ethical piece because we have a lot of nonprofits and people who haven't been able to get engaged with us for fear of losing their nonprofit status under administration like we have today, because it's technically a Schedule I substance. So for them to advocate for a Schedule I substance puts them at risk for a lot of things. If you get an attorney general or a deputy attorney generals or state attorney generals that just decide they don't want you to be doing what you're doing. And so we've had, it's taken some pretty brave pioneers to get us to the point where we are today. Basically say, we don't care what they say, this is our story, it's good, we're sticking by it. But ultimately that is still a stumbling block, and has been a stumbling block with even getting federal resources to help us in research and deployment and in the states where it's legal. It's just been, up until a year ago, was just still banned. Our USDA under Secretary Vilsack took a very strong pro-hemp position last August and said, it's legal, it's federally legal under the Farm Bill. We don't care what DEA says. DEA doesn't make the laws, Congress does. Congress legalized it in the Farm Bill, and we're gonna move forward and treat it as a crop like it should be.
So how does that work when it's legal but not like Congress says that it's legal, but then the DEA?
It's very messy, but we're winning. I'd say we're winning. Anytime we get any piece of legislation to the floor on this, we win. It sometimes gets stuck in committee because you have big pharma that whispering in so-and-so's ear. There's a lot of issues around this that slow it down. But we have been chipping away. So like the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And we've been taking one bite at a time pretty methodically and every day. And we're going to get there. It's a shame that we have to expend this kind of energy on something that can solve a problem, but that's unfortunately the only way we're going to get there.
I have 2 questions for the whole panel. One question I always get as an inland ocean person is, what can you possibly do as an inland person for the ocean? So if you guys could answer that. And the second one is, it's really great to see a lot of youth in the audience here and the entire conference. And maybe I kind of heard a little bit about everyone's stories and how they got to where they are, but maybe a word of advice or suggestion for people who are looking to get into an ocean career. Kind of one thing that really maybe stood out for you when you were planning your path. So 2 slightly different questions, but.
Well, I think the inland ocean piece, it's a little challenging because I often get that look like perplexed when I talk about, saving oceans from a mile high from Colorado or the inland. But when you actually start crafting the story, basically, no matter where you live, the issues are the same. So it's carrying your own water bottle, reducing your plastic, everything that you'll hear in every single one of these panels. But I think one of the different things would be talking to your political leaders. And there's this big void in the middle of the country where the politicians just don't think that it's relevant to them. And so I think making the time to convey the importance of the ocean and the follow the water idea, and the whole idea that, for example, in Colorado, we have more scuba divers. And so offshore oil development is significant for us because we travel. We go to the ocean, we have a recreation, and we have an economy that is dependent on healthy oceans. So it's, I think, just finding the links that might not be obvious to bring them around, and then to continue to talk about, we can, everything we do, no matter where we live, has an impact, and just keep driving that message home. Because people start eventually getting it. And we've seen that our coalition has grown, and more people are connecting to the fact that, you don't have to see the ocean to protect it. That is not a criteria, and just playing that up. And then just to answer your other question, so we can be shared by the other panelists, I think interning and volunteering is really key with organizations that have a good reputation, because they can then give you strong letters of recommendation, participating in events like this so you can put it on your resume, volunteering to do things like you're doing, Danielle. Like, you've been coordinating the inland delegation for how many delegations? So having that on your resume and really just doing things that stand out in a crowd and being just, I think the biggest word is showing initiative. And then working with people and aligning yourself with people that you admire, that know that they can make a recommendation to someone else. And I think that's really an important thing, getting in the right place and doing your part.
Two things. One is, if there's something that's happening locally that ultimately flows downstream, but people are also getting affected by it locally, I think that's a good way to start too. Right, so we know that some of the biggest polluter sources to the Chesapeake Bay are actually in the Schuylkill River, but Pennsylvania doesn't really see itself as part of the Chesapeake Bay because people don't really go there to recreate. So focusing more on the local pollution and the impacts to help downstream, that can be another tack. And then in terms of career, I would say three things. One is, totally agree with Vicki, we have internships, Air Club has internships, whatever. Environment America also has a 2-year fellows program. We hire people right out of college. We train people over the course of 2 years on all the nuts and bolts that you need to be an activist. And then I didn't catch your name from University of Tampa, but obviously, what's your name?
Faith.
Okay. Getting involved in local on-campus groups and having a track record of organizing people already, because that's one of the things I look at resumes is, have people already, started to do this work somehow, either working on campaigns or what have you. But there's also, some entry-level places, like we have a fellows program and some other groups do as well, and you can get entry that way too.
I have a question. And I only have this question because I just discovered that this is terrible that I didn't know this, and who knew with the advent of private prisons and others there isn't. And I discovered I was on a private ferry that's actually a contractor for Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, and there were 2 convicts that were working, and I thought, those are jobs. And then I found out that some of these states that could really benefit from the jobs of hemp, like Alabama and some of the other southern, is there a code of ethics that the hemp farmers might adopt so they don't hire convicts, or do they? Because I know it's it's becoming a huge thing in agriculture, and I also feel like that's another way to also expand the movement outward in a way, and to
I do think at its core, this whole movement is about social justice, because it's about clean air, clean water, abundance and products that we need just to live healthy lives. But the whole private prison complex, we're 2% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prisoners. Most of that rooted in our drastically failed war on drugs, which covers the entirety of the planet. Quite frankly, they were arresting Alex Whitetail Feather Flume in South Dakota for growing hemp, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So, and I'll give you just a quick story on just how upside down this is. I'll try to be brief. In 2013, when we were arguing, when Congressman Polis was arguing the amendment for the Farm Bill that I'd written, that I mentioned earlier, I had a hemp flag made out of hemp fiber, silkscreen, American flag, regulation size. I had it so he could have it in his hand on the floor while he was debating. And we won that debate. As I left the chamber that night, the debate went late in the evening, and I looked up, and this is June 28th of 2013. And I looked up, and of course the flags fly over the chambers when they're in session. I thought, wait a minute, I've got a flag, and there's a flag, and it's about July 4th. I wonder if we could find a way to get this flag flown over the Capitol. So we did a little sleuthing the next day and got some got a couple favors from some folks in the architect's office and decided to keep it real quiet. And July 4th, and so late on the afternoon of July 3rd, we got the thumbs up. Everybody's going to be quiet about it. I got the thumbs up on to go. So late on the afternoon of July 3rd, I get a call from a reporter at the Washington Post who'd done a story on some of my work with the White House and hemp earlier. And I thought she was calling me about this. I thought I'd been leaked or somehow. And so I had a real smart aleck response when I answered the phone. It was like, okay, who told you? And she's like, who told you what? And I'm like, no, what are you calling me? So I told her the story. And I said, but I don't want to break this until tomorrow because I'm afraid somebody is going to intervene here. This is, and we really want this flag over the Capitol on July 4th. And she goes, oh, for heaven's sake, it's Friday. No, everybody's gone. Let me break the story. So she broke the story late on July 3rd. So when the July 4th papers came out, it was on the page. Hey, there's a hemp flag flying over the Capitol that day. Well, if you fast forward to October in Boston, then DEA Administrator Michelle Leonhardt was speaking to a group of sheriffs at the National Sheriff's Convention and proceeded to tell them that when she woke up on July 4th of 2013 and read in the paper that there was a hemp flag flying over the Capitol, it was the worst day of her 33-year career at DEA. And that she was against all illegal drugs, even the flag-making kind. And so it gives you a sense of just the bureaucracy and the inert and what's going on inside DEA around things that they're so vested in and they've built budgets around that they don't want to have go away.
And it's such, like, to me, what Vicki's doing with the grassroots, and this is why, like what Blue Ocean drinks, what is your best organizing tool? Because really, it is honestly, until the grassroots, the seaweed folks get mobilized, you're not going to have that policy, or you're not going to have that longevity. We did so much work with national open policy, but it's like we need more grassroots.
Well, you can say you need to get rid of the DEA instead of the EPA.
Yeah. There we go.
So, what is your favorite organizing tool? And when and to get people
So
excited.
we do a monthly blue drinks for almost every month, and it is a great opportunity. And sometimes the blue drinks are just social. Sometimes we bring in a speaker. Oftentimes we'll collaborate. We just did a turquoise drinks a few weeks ago with the green drinks. So having those regular get-togethers, and then when you do it at different locations, sometimes it's a dive shop, sometimes it's a store. I mean, we've had it at Prana, we've had it at Fleta. And so it's just a way to bring the idea of unity together, that we can share this concept of cocktails, and they're blue drinks, so it's really about the ocean, and it brings in the scientists, the divers, the photographers. It just brings in everybody. So it's a way to actually share your message in a really fun way. And then if you are having events coming up, or a Blue Vision Summit, or a Denver Hill Day, you can bring that around. Or if we're doing an Ocean Rangers training, that's also a platform to talk about your next steps and to get people involved. So that's been very successful. We've been doing that for over 5 years. And tonight we're even having a Blue Drinks here in collaboration with a coral restoration organization. So again, it's collaborate, talking about it, having fun, and just then sharing your message within that context. So it's always been a very good, successful thing for us.
We just finished a little fundraiser for NHA. I think we'll do something larger, but we had Willie Nelson's youngest son, Micah, who has his own band, is a very passionate industrial hemp advocate. And he has his own band. There are hemp guitars made in Canada from the hemp composites. So we got the guitar. He plays in the band.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. I know. We're like almost like running over, and I'm so, I know I could go on forever, and like I have so many more questions now. The more questions, the more questions. So, but thank you so much for your patience. But if you want to.